Zelensky Bad News Putin suggests there is room for military cooperation between the two countries. The highly anticipated arms deal between North Korea and the United States has been delayed after Kim Jong-un met with Vladimir Putin in Russia. Russian state media reported that after the Vostochny Space Center talks concluded, Mr. Kim boarded his private armored train and began the long journey home. Mr. Putin said they had discussed possibilities for military cooperation later on Wednesday. Russia has promised North Korea satellite technology in exchange for Pyongyang's cooperation. The United States has accused the parties involved in the talks of trying to buy weapons to support Russia's war against Ukraine, which both sides have denied. Mr. Kim is believed to have requested food aid in addition to cutting-edge space technology. At a time when relations between the two sanctioned regimes and the West are at an all-time low, senior officials from both sides met. Mr. Kim, who spent 2 days in the far east of Russia, was given a warm welcome by Mr. Putin during his high-profile visit. The two leaders were captured on camera smiling and shaking hands by Russian state media before Putin gave Kim a personal tour of the Vostochny Space Center. Mr. Putin welcomed his North Korean counterpart with the Russian adage, "An old friend is better than two new ones," referring to the long-standing relationship between the Soviet Union and North Korea. Mr. Putin was reportedly quoted in the Russian media as saying, "This is why we've come to Vostochny Cosmodrome," in response to a question about whether or not Russia would assist North Korea in the construction of satellites. North Korea twice attempted to launch a spy satellite earlier this year, but both times were unsuccessful. Pyongyang has promised to create one to improve its armed forces' ability to keep an eye on things. In the meantime, Mr. Kim seemed to back Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. Against the hegemonic forces of the West, Mr. Kim told Mr. Putin, "Russia has risen to a sacred fight to protect its sovereignty and security. We will always back President Putin and the Russian leadership in their decisions, and we will stand together against imperialism. Any transfer of arms between the two countries would violate UN Security Council resolutions, as stated by U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller on Tuesday, and would be a sign of the desperate state in which the Russian government finds itself, in light of the conflict in Ukraine. In case it becomes necessary," he said, "we will not hesitate to take action to hold those accountable." Earlier, the Kremlin had insisted that Moscow and Pyongyang's own interests should take precedence over warnings from Washington. However, Putin seemed to allude to Russia's adherence to UN resolutions after the summit when he said, "There are certain limitations to military cooperation." Mr. Kim's trip was his first overseas since 2019. After failed nuclear disarmament talks with then U.S. President Donald Trump, his last trip abroad was to meet with Mr. Putin. The train chugged northward to Vostochny, surprising many who had assumed he was headed to Vladivostok, where Mr. Putin was attending an economic forum. North Korea conducted another illegal weapons test on Wednesday morning, firing 2 short-range missiles into the sea off its east coast as Mr. Kim was getting closer to his destination. Mr. Putin claims that the North Korean leader will visit several factories and the city of Vladivostok on his way home. Traveling in style on Kim Jong-un's bulletproof train. A Putin-Kim Jong-un alliance. How worrisome is it? Pyongyang's missiles, including the Hwasong intercontinental ballistic missile, were on display for Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu during Mr. Kim's meeting with the Russian delegation in July. According to experts, Moscow would be interested in purchasing North Korean arms because they are compatible with Russian weapon systems. According to Valery Akimenko, a specialist on Russia's armed forces at the Conflict Studies Research Center, artillery is the god Russia worships on the battlefront, so artillery shells and guns would be especially sought after. Kim Dong-yup, a professor at the University of North Korean Studies, speculated that Pyongyang would provide these and, even older types of missiles, if asked. Newer weapons, including short-range ballistic missiles like the so-called super-large rocket KN-25, may also be supplied, according to Yang UK, a research fellow at the Asian Institute for Policy Studies. Since the Korean War ended in an armistice in 1953, some analysts believe North Korea may have amassed a sizable arsenal it is reluctant to part with due to the country's limited resources. However, experts agree that Moscow's war effort would only benefit temporarily from North Korea's weapons. They claim that Moscow is using older, less reliable artillery shell stocks due to its severely depleted ammunition supply. Arms from North Korea could be used as a stopgap measure, while Russia struggles to increase production, as noted by Mr. Akamenko. However, the deal would have little strategic impact given the rate at which Russia has been using up its supplies. More Ukrainians would be killed. On the other hand, it will not kill Ukraine, he reassured. Border closures during COVID have had a significant impact on North Korea's already impoverished regime, which has only recently begun to ease sanctions. Pyongyang may ask Russia for more than just food aid. Some observers believe that advanced submarine and ballistic technology may be where Mr. Putin draws the line. A Putin-Kim Jong-un alliance. How worrisome is it? According to Professor Leif Erik Easley of Ewha Women's University in Seoul, even a desperate war machine does not trade its military crown jewels for old, dumb munitions. The summit raises the more fundamental question of whether or not the severe sanctions against Russia and North Korea are having any effect. According to Rory Daniels, managing director of the Asia Society Policy Institute, ASPI, the two countries can transact business without fear of further punishment, because of international sanctions. To paraphrase, the more states under severe sanction are pushed together, the less the U.S. can do to use sanctions as leverage to resolve the underlying conflicts. Associate Professor of North Korean Studies at Ewha Women's University Park Won-gon warned that the situation poses risks for Pyongyang. Evidence of North Korean weapon use by Russia in Ukraine could turn the entire NATO alliance against North Korea and lead to further sanctions being imposed on the country.